Nas will never work with Kanye West again, and the reason why is going to shock you. Now, as it stands, Nas isn't just remembered for his classic albums like Illmatic and It Was Written, but is celebrated today for his unprecedented run in the 2020s, which has given us two entire trilogies of acclaimed albums with the King's Disease and Magic series. Never before in the history of hip-hop have we seen an MC as seasoned as Nas work this tirelessly to deliver us quality album after quality album, but do you know the reason why Nas went on this tear in the first place? Well, we have been occupied enjoying the 6-album saga from 2020's King's Disease to this year's Magic 3. If we take the rose-petaled glasses off and look back just a few years before this new golden age for Nas music, you will remember something that was truly terrible for hip-hop. During the end of the 2010s, people started to question Nas's legacy and status in the rap world, and the reason why is quite shocking. In just a single moment, Nas went from being helmed as one of the most undeniable legendary forces to ever grace a microphone to being perceived as a washed-up shell of former greatness. Now, the crazy part is, the reason why this narrative was born in the first place, the reason why many began to write off Nas and dismiss him from the GOAT conversation as a whole, was because of the one and only Kanye West. Now, when you think about this at first, it may sound insane. After all, Kanye West has said that Nas is his favorite rapper of all time. How could he destroy his reputation this badly? But it's this very love for Nas that actually ended up becoming the root of the problem. Now, before we can understand how Kanye West rained down this damage upon Nas's legacy, we gotta go back in time a little. Ever since Nas was featured on Kanye West's 2005 song We Major, the only thing anybody ever wanted from these two was more music together. Nas's razor-sharp lyricism worked so well over the silky smooth beats from Kanye West, and considering the chemistry they had from the get-go, it seemed like this duo was only bound for greatness in the future. While here and there we did get some tracks from the pair, Nas and Kanye would never work in the capacity anybody ever wanted them to, and the possibility of a collab album between them became one of the biggest what-ifs in hip-hop. It even got to the point where Barack Obama personally asked Kanye West to produce an entire Nas album, and after years went by and people began to lose hope that this album would ever happen, the unimaginable would occur. One day in 2018, Kanye West shattered the internet as he announced that he was working on a ton of albums all set to release in the summer, including his solo album Ye, Pusha T's Daytona, a collab album with Kid Cudi, and at the end of all this, dropped a bomb on the music world as he announced that following these releases, he would be producing an entire Nas album set to release on June 15th of that year. Now, with Kanye West finally announcing that him and Nas were gonna be releasing an entire album together, the hip-hop world exploded. After over a decade of speculation and hope, arguably the most gifted MC and producer in rap's entire history were gonna be combining the best of their abilities to give us something unforgettable, and the hype for this album was off the wall. People believed that this could have finally been the Nas album to reach the heights Illmatic did all those years ago, and as Kanye put out each one of the Good Music summer releases, the expectation for the Nas record only became higher and higher. Daytona was received amazingly by fans and critics alike, with everybody hailing it as Pusha T's best solo album. Ye was an important record that challenged the status quo of the music industry in classic Kanye fashion, and Kids See Ghost was praised as one of the best albums of the entire 2010s, so with Nas and Kanye's rapper-producer effort titled Nasir dropping after all of this, serving as the grand finale to what would become one of the most legendary runs in modern hip-hop, the world was ready to receive an all-time classic, to get the album that would define a generation, and once the album finally dropped, the worst happened. As soon as people heard Nasir, the dreams they had for this once-in-a-lifetime musical experience were shattered, as the record they were given was mediocre at best. For a duo as talented as Nas and Kanye, something just felt off, and everybody noticed. There were a ton of problems with Nasir fundamentally, with one of the biggest criticisms being Nas's lyricism actually. People felt Nas's pen felt more directionless and dull than it had ever been, and with Kanye coming off a run that just featured 3 of the best rap albums of that respective year, everyone immediately blamed Nas for the failure of this record. Kanye's production was just as good as it had ever been, and from what the album offered us, Nas was the one with the funky verses, verses and aimless writing, so in the eyes of the public, Nas fumbled the biggest home run he has had in his career since Illmatic, and people did not forgive him for this. Now, making things even worse for Nas, less than a year later, he tried to earn back the goodwill of fans, releasing The Lost Tapes 2, a sequel to one of his cult classic records, and despite all the amazing producers that did beats for this record, it was received even worse than Nasir. So with two major duds under his belt, fans lost all hope in Nas and started to accept the fact that maybe his career was over until he did the impossible. Now, despite the failures of Nasir and Lost Tapes 2, it's important to note that there are untold stories about both of these albums that to this day, nobody really acknowledges. In the case of Nasir, the album had one of the shortest and most troubled production cycles in the history of hip-hop. Because of Kanye West's hectic creative cycle, Nas was only given 7 days to complete an album that fans had waited a lifetime for. Kanye was too busy finishing his other albums like Kids See Ghost and Tiana Taylor's KTSE, and with all of these other albums all having their own dedicated studio sessions month in advance from their final weeks of production, Kanye and all of his other respective collaborators were able to form the visions that they wanted to. Meanwhile, Nas got the worst end of it all. Kanye gave Nas just a week to create an entire vision for a record from scratch. Nas was tasked with writing verses and stories that all had interconnected themes and meanings in such a short window, and for somebody as calculated and thoughtful as Nas, this was an impossible task. While artists like Kid Cudi and Pusha T had months in advance to carefully figure out how they wanted to craft their albums, Nas was left rushing every aspect of the most important project he had done in decades. While Nas did beg Kanye to give him more time to complete the album, Ye resisted as he wanted to get it out at the targeted date of June 15th, and as a result, we got the version of Nasir that felt so confusing and hollow. Now, when you consider that this album was made in less than a week, Nasir is really not all that bad, but Nas only told this story well after Nasir already came and made its impression on the cultural zeitgeist. At the time, nobody knew the disaster that was the record's creative process, so as Kanye came off what many would say is one of the greatest album runs in modern hip-hop with Ye, Daytona, and Kids See Ghosts, many believed that Nas was the problem, and by fumbling a Kanye-produced album, he had now fumbled what would start the latter half of his career. Lost Tapes 2 only further cemented the narrative that Nas fell off, but again, what we fail to understand when it comes to the story of this album is that Nas just threw this together with a bunch of songs in the vault so he can get out of his Def Jam contract and be independent, releasing music under his own Mass Appeal Records imprint. So while the hip-hop community was pushing the narrative that Nas had fallen off and that his whole legacy may not be as legendary as we thought, the truth was because of narratives and factors that we did not understand, because of the inner workings of the industry and what was happening behind the curtains, we were fed something that did not reflect where Nas was really at. While by no means intentional, the way Kanye West rushed Nasir caused damage that for most artists would have been career-ending, but fortunately, Nas is not most artists. With Nas understanding the truth behind his last two records, he realized that he had to prove to the rap world that he had not fallen off, and this is where everything changed forever. Nas knew he was still good enough to leave an impact on hip-hop in his advanced age, just like somebody like Jay-Z did with 444, so the only question he had left to answer was, how was he going to approach this grand comeback? Now, in the year 2011, Nas was invited to a studio session by Frank Ocean one day where Frank introduced him to a producer known as Hit Boy, and the two immediately had chemistry. While nothing major would happen between the two during this studio session, one day in 2020 they were both in LA and decided to link up. After bouncing back some ideas off one another, the two would cook up a few songs, and after realizing how seamless their chemistry came, Nas and Hit Boy decided that they were gonna make an entire Valentine's Day EP. Now, as Nas and Hit Boy worked more on this project, the duo realized something that would change both of their careers forever. By working together day after day, Nas and Hit discovered that their creative capabilities offered a lot more than a simple Valentine's Day record, and from here, they decided to make an entire studio album. This decision eventually resulted in 2020's King's Disease, a record that gave Nas the rebirth into the modern era that he always deserved. From start to finish on this album, Nas showed the world that he had never missed a step, and he was just as sharp as ever in between the glossy production from Hit Boy and collabs with new age artists like Big Sean and Don Toliver. Oliver. The album was immediately embraced by fans new and old, and as soon as Nas found success with this record, he and Hit-Boy decided to do something that had never been done in the history of hip-hop. King's Disease would end up winning Nas the Grammy for Best Rap Album in 2021, and this was all the momentum he and Hit needed to release its sequel in the summer of that year, and this album became even more successful than the last. Albums like King's Disease 1 and 2 were praised for featuring the evolved version of Nas that people wanted to see out of him on Nasir. Nas was able to still offer so much in his career, bring so much to the table while working with the sonic mind of Hit-Boy, but after the success of these two records, they were still not done. Nas only continued to push forward and would follow up on these two records by creating an entire new series with Hit-Boy titled Magic. Now, where King's Disease focused on showing us the reborn Nas who was wiser than ever, Magic acknowledged the pure hunger and passion Nasir Jones still has for hip-hop, and it directly expressed to listeners the fact that Nas's proficiency as an MC has not dropped off one bit and that it's really only grown and evolved over time. Following this in 2022, Nas would achieve a new high with King's Disease 3, which in my eyes and many others is the best album he would drop during this entire run, and this year he has completed off this modern saga of albums with Magic 2 and 3, which are charged with their own inspiring and distinct performances. Now, looking at all 6 of the albums Nas has released in this quick time, they have all left their mark on the culture in their own way. From teaming up with Eminem, 50 Cent, and Lil Wayne to featuring some of the wisest, most profound performances ever seen from an MC in the history of hip-hop. The albums Nas has released alongside Hit-Boy have cemented him as an eternal force in the rap game who will only decline when he decides to hang it up to Father Time. Releasing 6 remarkable records in a little over 3 years is something that almost no other artist has ever done, especially at the advanced age Nas is at. So after releasing 2 trilogies worth of records with the Magic and King's Disease series, Nas has put himself in a position where his greatness, his legacy will never be questioned again no matter the circumstance. Teaming up with Hit-Boy truly changed his career and redefined the rest of his legacy, as beyond how good he was in his heyday, Nas is one of the very few musicians who did not just make a great album in their advanced age, but entered an entirely new prime. It's both a sentiment to Nas's work ethic and skill, but also Hit-Boy as a producer and collaborator, as he knew how to channel this energy from Nas and give us memorable record after memorable record to show for it. Now, to look back at the way we got here, as great as Kanye West is, the haphazardly creative process he is synonymous with does not work for an MC as poignant as Nas. So no matter how talented these two may have been and how many great individual moments they have provided us over the years, making a truly special joint album was always going to be more of a dream than a reality. So overall, while Nas and Kanye West's collaborative relationship remains in ashes today, and it almost cost us Nas's longevity in the genre he was once the face of, the secret blessing behind the madness of that moment is that it got Nas to the point where he is at today. Point where he is having a second career renaissance, gaining tons of new fans, and even reaching new career heights such as winning his first Grammy and even selling out Madison Square Garden for the first time. So while the tale of Kanye and Nas's collaborative relationship goes to show you that working with the wrong people or working with somebody at the wrong time can cost you everything, what it showed us about Nas is that he can come back from any adversity he faces, and looking at everything that the most recent chapter of his journey channeled in him, it only further cements Nas's status as an all-time legend. So let me know, how do you feel about the way Nas and Kanye's creative partnership played out, and are you happy that because of the failure of their work, we ended up getting the King's Disease and Magic trilogies? Let me know in the comments. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and it is free to do. Thank you for watching. Your support means everything. Mr. F, fantastic hip hop. Catch you in the next video.